And this morning I'm going to talk about keeping your mind sharp with a subtitle, Alzheimer's, memory loss, cognitive decline, and dementia. And we're told in Mark 8:18, Jesus said to the disciples, "Do ye not remember?" Which implies they needed to remember. And memory is very important. In Desire of Ages 3:1-3 it says, He, God, does not give His children all the directions for their life journey at once, lest they should become confused. He tells them just as much as they can remember and perform. So if you're wondering why God may not be working in your life, maybe your memory isn't good enough to give you some instructions to keep you going. But that said, I just want to bring the point out that it's important to have a good mind in order to work for the Lord, to comprehend the Lord, to remember what we're supposed to be doing. And as part of, memory is a part of intelligence, it's a part of a lot of things. I'm hoping after this presentation you will know more about the causes and natural home remedies for Alzheimer's and other dementias. And as an illustration, we had a family up in Michigan that said, our mom was down in Florida where she was retired. She was getting up there in years, and her ability to function and to remember became limited. And so they brought Grandma up to Michigan. And along with the changing environment as far as one state to another, they also changed her diet and lifestyle quite dramatically to a more I might say, New Start type of lifestyle. And I'm going to tell you what happened as a result of that toward the end of this talk. First of all, a little bit more about me. I've been specializing in what we call lifestyle medicine. Really, lifestyle medicine maximizes your health above the probability of disease. You reduce your risks. And so that's what our goal is here. Excuse me, is to reduce our risks, especially of Alzheimer's. So if you choose healthy lifestyle habits, you can have healthy bodies and healthy brains. And so in this talk I'm going to cover who's getting dementias like Alzheimer's. And I'm going to use Alzheimer's and dementia interchangeably. There's many different types of dementia, but a lot of the principles are exactly the same. We're going to talk about how your diet affects your brain, how physical and mental exercise affect your brain, and also about psychosocial health and its impact on dementia. So, what is dementia anyway? Well, it's really progression of brain failure. You've heard of heart failure, you've heard of kidney failure. Well, this is brain failure. And it's really a decline in brain function over time. And just like with some heart failure and some kidney failure, some of this is hard to reverse. But there are things to do to make a difference. Dementia is a loss of memory for the most part, a loss of intellect, a loss of rationality, loss of social skills, and also it can impact physical functioning. It can happen to anybody, but it's more common as you get older, especially after 65. Now, there are several different types of dementias that are quite common. Alzheimer's is the most common, but there's also vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia, and Lewy body disease. Many others. Some are caused by trauma, some are caused by stroke, and so forth. But anyway, dementias in general have those similar features of a loss of memory. Who gets dementia? Well, if we look at ages, age 1 to 64 years old, it's 1 in 33. 65 to 74 years, it's 1 in 6. 75 years and older, it's 1 in 3. So you can see how this progresses as you get older. So how do we diagnose Alzheimer's? Well, the gold standard is to get a biopsy of somebody's brain, which isn't really easy to do while they're still alive, so it's usually done after they're passed away. But if we did look at a slide under a microscope, there's two features that we want to talk about, that we'll talk about how lifestyle impacts these features. One is amyloid plaque. Amyloid is sort of a nondescript protein that's often the result of high inflammation in the body. Basically, it's proteins that they've been sort of denatured, no longer function as they would have before, and now are collected in spots in the brain between the neurons. So amyloid plaques happen between neurons. Within the neuronal bodies, within the bodies of the cells of the neurons, you get neurofibrillary tangles, sort of little spicules of junk that is all filling up the cells. So those are the two features. So as we talk about what changes your amyloid risk or what increases or decreases amyloid, you'll know we're talking about these plaques between cells that are characteristic of Alzheimer's. There are 10 signs you may be getting dementia. 1, memory loss that disrupts daily life, which means a person who had a good memory wouldn't have to stop and waste time on what you're stopping and wasting time on. Number 2, changes in planning or solving problems. Problems that didn't used to challenge you now challenge you more than they should. Being able to plan, especially long-distance planning. You aren't able to make plans very far. Number 3, difficulty completing familiar tasks at home. Anything from cleaning up after a meal to cleaning house, arranging things, or at work, or at leisure. Things that you used to do without even thinking about now challenge you. Number 4, confusion with time or place. Where am I? What is today? What time is it? Number 5, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. This would particularly be challenging for driving a car. Recognizing signs and shapes of signs and distances. Number 6, new problems with words and speaking or writing. Anomia, can't think of what the name of that person was I used to know so well. Or having trouble coming up with a word that used to be on the tip of your tongue at all times. Number 7, misplacing things or losing the ability to retrace steps. This leads to the wandering off of Alzheimer's patients to where they get lost. And number 8, decreased or poor judgment. And this plays into older folks being taken advantage of by con artists and taking away all their estate without them realizing they just signed their estate away. Number 9, withdrawal from work or social activities. Don't want to be with the folks anymore. And number 10, changes in mood and personality, which may be more recognized by those around you than you yourself. So, 10 things to think about. And the more of those 10 you have, the more concern there is. But as big as that concern may be, I hope to give you pointers that will help you realize that it's reversible, at least to a certain extent, and in some of the studies. And so I'm going to start out by saying go nutrient dense with your diet. Eat more fresh fruit. Fresh fruit is very important. In a study in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, they looked at different amounts of fruit being eaten every day. Those who ate less than 1 piece of fruit per day had a very high risk of Alzheimer's. Those who ate 2 to 3 pieces of fruit per day lowered their risk by 40% by comparison. And then those who ate more than 3 pieces of fruit per day, we're talking fresh fruit, pieces of fruit, had a 60% lower risk of Alzheimer's. So eating more fruit is particularly beneficial, and fresh vegetables also been studied. The increased consumption of fruit and vegetables is associated with a reduced risk of cognitive impairment and dementia, according to a very good study recently. And so look at your food, think about what you're eating, and, what have I been talking about here? Fresh fruit and vegetables? Suppose Adam would have recognized those? Sure. You think he would have recognized packaged foods or crinkly bags? No. So we're talking the Bible diet here, aren't we? God gave Adam good food. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and you will eat the plants of the field. Quoting from Genesis there. And so we were given a good diet, and it would have kept our minds good and clear, kept Adam going for 930 years. Now, which fruits would be the most helpful? Well, I'm going to talk about the ones that have been studied. I'm not going to say any fruit's going to be bad, fresh fruit. But I will say the ones that have been studied do have some evidence behind them that does help some people with their choices. And number 1 is berries. And other berries, blueberries have been studied. They've been helpful. Strawberries. Another berry that we may not grow so commonly here is goji berries. Been studied and shown to be helpful. Other fruits, pomegranate. And pomegranates are something that was found in the temple, weren't they? On the hems of the priests' robes. And then there's the apples. Apples actually help, and they've got phytochemicals like quercetin that have many antioxidant benefits. Figs, and I enjoy figs, so when I heard figs were to help with Alzheimer's, I thought, well, there's no limiting my consumption of those now. Well, if you're eating just raw, dried figs, you might get a bit too much sugar, so I just mentioned that on purpose. Not that you can always find fresh figs, but dried figs do probably have some of the benefit too. Then there's cherries and plums, grapefruit. Grapefruit's very good for blood flow, you know, and that'll help getting blood to your brain. And peppers, or in some countries they call them capsicum, like bell peppers, red, orange, yellow, green type of peppers. And they also help with blood flow. So then there's certain vitamins that you need to be aware of that will be found in some of these fruits that are helpful, have been studied. Vitamins A, C, and E. And if you look at the average population who eat the average Western diet, they get some vitamin C, E, and A. But if you look at people on a plant-based diet, they get 3 times as much vitamin C and vitamin E and 2.5 times as much vitamin A. So really, plant-based diet is the nutrient-dense diet. If you are eating meat as part of your diet to try to get nutrition, you have to be very careful or you'll go malnourished. Now, vegetables, the ones that have been studied are cruciferous and green leafy vegetables. They slow cognitive decline and they lower your risk of dementia as you get older. So lots of good food there, and cruciferous vegetables would be like cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. Now I'm going to put a little note in here, and that is, some people say, and there's a book out there that says, juice your way to fabulous health. But I'm going to say not so according to recent scientific evidence. In fact, in one study in Journal of Alzheimer and Dementia, they discovered people who drink juice every day have lower brain volumes and poorer memories. And if we look a bit at the Spirit of Prophecy, Ellen White says, I'm telling everybody everywhere to give up liquid food as much as possible. Really, juicing came out of India with Ayurvedic medicine, and it's about balancing the air, fire, and water in your head. Things that we don't really think are there. So juicing is not the answer. Fat, sick, and nearly dead is not going to have a good brain. Anyway, back to our talk and thinking about good foods. Whole grains are particularly helpful as opposed to refined grains. Refined grains tend to make your blood sugars go too high, and diabetics have worse brains, so there you go. And so healthy staples, such as grains and beans, are definitely going to be there to maintain good brain health, especially beans. They have different phytochemicals that are precursors to neurotransmitters. Also nuts and seeds, which are high in certain minerals that are beneficial for the brain. Now, since we've talked about vegetables, I do want to take a minute to speak about herbs. Herbs tend to be plants that we find medicinal properties in that can be beneficial for Alzheimer's. I'm not saying eat the way you're always going to eat and expect a few herbs to help your brain. I'm saying change your whole lifestyle, but as an adjuvant to that, or to help with that, you might want to add some herbal teas, perhaps. Herbs that have been helpful are ashwagandha, brahmi, agachicola, ginkgo biloba. And if you go to my website, I'll have a handout on this lecture called Keeping Your Mind Sharp. And I'll tell you about my website. It's for easy finding. It's rev14.com. That's revelation14.com. rev14.com. And you'll find a handout there with all the listed herbs, which I won't go through because it's quite a long list, but I give the reasons why they're helpful in the handout as well. Well, okay. What causes dementia? What's the number one cause of dementia? This may surprise you, or maybe it won't. but I'm going to put it out there because you need to know that the number one cause of dementia is overeating. Yeah, eating too much food. Or taking too many calories on at a time. Stuffing your stomach too full. Filling yourself up and making yourself so full that you can't handle anymore. And most people know when they've overeaten, that obtunded feeling. It increases your brain's inflammation and the amyloid protein in your brain. Remember the amyloid plaque in the brains? And it decreases blood flow and oxygen to the brain. And so you don't want to decrease the blood flow and oxygen to your brain. That's a bad thing. And so this reminds me of Ecclesiastes 10:17. Blessed art thou, O land, when thy king is the son of nobles, and thy princes eat in due season, for strength and not for drunkenness. Another way we say that today is eat to live, not live to eat. So you eat food to accomplish the tasks that you need to accomplish during the day. You don't just eat recreationally to see how much you can satisfy your appetite. I mean, how do you decide how much food to eat? Well, if it tastes good, eat more, right? Well, that keeps the fast food restaurants and the doctors in business, but that may not be what you want to be doing. Now, back to this overeating thing. On the other side of the question then, or as a opposite thing to think about, Okinawans are 75% less likely to get Alzheimer's. 75% likely to get cognitive decline. What is the key feature that we think impacts this? They're among those blue zones that live longer. Well, Okinawans eat 40% fewer calories than Americans. That's 40% less food. And in Inspiration, we're told we could often eat half what we do. And so they eat less food and they have their brains longer. So there you go. Eat too much, lose your brain. Eat less, and your brain functions better longer. So don't overeat. Now, there are certain foods, no matter how much you eat of them, that will especially impact your brain. These are foods that you want to be aware of, because if you're eating them, your brain suffers. Your brain is saying, why did you eat that again? Well, here they are. First is meat, high-fat foods, and fried foods. Think of a hamburger and fries. And the meat is definitely associated with cognitive decline. And I'll touch on that a little more here as we go along. But just the epidemiological studies, more meat, less brain. You would rather be more brain and less brawn, right? So here we go. And then there's the high-fat foods. You see, the fat goes in the bloodstream, and we talked about this last time when we talked about high cholesterol, but the fat goes in the bloodstream, and it causes the little red blood cells to all clump together, and when they go to the brain, they can't get through the little capillaries, and then you don't get oxygen to the brain. So you want to make sure you're not eating high fat. And then this also goes with fried foods, but fried foods have an additional factor, and that is when you fry something, you create acrylamides and oxidized lipids and all kinds of free radicals, and those cause more neurofibrillary tangles. So be aware of that. Then there's high-fat dairy and cheese and so forth. See, cheese is high-fat with cholesterol. It's rotted, it's spoiled, it's fermented, and it's got high levels of oxidants and free radicals. You eat that, it causes your brain to deteriorate. Another one is sugar. Sugar causes the red blood cells to clump together too, but it also raises inflammation in the body. And it is like making the cells overeat because they take on too much free carbohydrate, and you're in trouble. Then when you mix milk with sugar, such as in ice cream, you get the problem of your cholesterol in your blood going up for a long time, like a whole day, as opposed to just a little while. And so the two combined together are not going to help you with Alzheimer's. And the two together also make alcohol in your stomach, and we'll talk about alcohol and Alzheimer's as we go along here. No, you don't want to drink red wine to keep from getting Alzheimer's. Unless, of course, you own a red wine factory and need to keep the business going, and you're more interested in money than health. But let's get back here to this meat eating thing. People who eat meat increase their risk of Alzheimer's by 3 times, not 3%, 3 times. That's 300%. And it's interesting that when we study Alzheimer's patients after they've died and we check their brains, take a sample, we discover that in one study, 13% of Alzheimer's patients actually had mad cow disease. And yes, when somebody's alive, there's a lot of similarities between mad cow disease and Alzheimer's. So, you won't get mad cow disease from eating a carrot, but you probably will get it from eating an animal product, especially cows, of course, mad cow. But it can be from sheep and goats, it can be from eating deer with chronic wasting. So be aware of that. And now let's talk about other factors that impact your risk of Alzheimer's. Snacking. Don't eat between meals. The pleasure of doing so will eventually be forgotten as your brain deteriorates. You want to have a regular schedule. People with brain failure, brain problems, I deal with people who have had strokes or MS or blunt trauma, and part of the protocol for getting them back on track is to have them eat at the same time every day, 7 days a week. And if you maintain a regular meal schedule with 2 or 3 meals per day, no snacking between meals, 5 hours between meals, it has an anti-aging effect on your brain. And that's what you want, your brain to be younger. Now, speaking of food and speaking of your brain, when you eat food, it goes down to your stomach, goes into your intestines, and their bacteria help you with your digestion. And it's interesting that healthy gut bacteria improve your memory and inhibit the development of Alzheimer's. And some people taking that information say, well, where can I find healthy bacteria? And they go down and get a probiotic and they stick it in their body and they say, okay, I'm all fixed. Well, it's kind of like bringing refugees over from Somalia, dropping them in New York City, and then expecting them to survive without giving them good support. If you don't support good bacteria with good food that nurtures the right type of bacteria, it won't make any difference. They'll just die off. So, in fact, the other is true, too. You don't have to add bacteria. You just eat good food, like fresh fruits and vegetables, and in a couple months, your bacteria will have changed in your gut, and you'll have a healthier brain just because you have healthier bacteria in your brain. We call it the brain-gut axis. And so be aware that good food supports good bacteria. Now, one thing that will affect your brain is coming from your stomach, and that is if the stomach is frustrated. A frustrated stomach translates to a frustrated brain. And one of the things you can do to make sure your stomach isn't frustrated is keep the combinations simple. A large variety of food at one meal frustrates the stomach. And the stomach has different digestive plans for different foods, but if you throw out a too great a different variety of foods, especially in different types of foods, your stomach's going to be frustrated and you're going to end up with more inflammation, more frustration, more blood pooling at the stomach, and the brain is going to suffer. Eating fruits and vegetables at the same meal has this impact, and we can study that in Counsels in Diets and Foods. And here's what happens. The fruits may be rotting while the vegetables are still digesting. The other thing is there's different probiotic bacteria that naturally live on fruit than live on vegetables. And you end up with a war of bacteria eating too much variations. What's a fruit? Well, it has a seed. What's a vegetable? It's the root like a carrot, the stem like a celery, a leaf like a spinach, or a flower like a cauliflower. And so a lot of people mix tomatoes and onions, or they mix avocados and lettuce, or they mix, they have all these mixtures, cucumbers in their romaine salad. And when they do that, it's not real good for the brain. I mean, you can wait till you have Alzheimer's to make those changes, or you can make them ahead of time. And now, speaking of salads and so forth, a lot of people put things on their salads that aren't helpful, that have a lot of monosodium glutamate. Monosodium glutamate increases Alzheimer's degenerative changes in your brain. And so you have to read labels. You have to do some research. There's a good website out there, truthandlabeling.org, that'll help you sort this out. But some common things people use that are high in monosodium glutamate are Bragg's liquid aminos or soy sauce. I mean, soy is 20% glutamate by weight anyway, so you make it into individual amino acids with a bunch of salt, and you got monosodium glutamate. Marmite, Vegemite, Promite. Different seasonings. I haven't found too many seasonings such as chicken seasoning or soup bouillon or whatever that didn't have ingredients that were hiding monosodium glutamate, nutritional yeast, something you don't want because of the monosodium glutamate content, and other reasons too for mycotoxins and so forth. Anyway, we're talking brain health here, and so we're talking about some of the more finer points because you want the fine nerves of your brain to be healthy. Many people realize that caffeine isn't a big help to their brains. Now there's a bunch of, I'll just digress here a minute. You have a few PhD researchers who are trying to complete their studies at some university, and they serendipitously happen on some prominent, popular, economically huge food in the market that causes, let's say, cancer. Well, guess what? That article gets published, and then within 5 years, there'll be 20 articles arguing against it, all funded by the industry who has deep pockets and wants to let you know that their caffeine or their coffee or their red wine or their apple cider, rotten apple vinegar was really good. Well, you have to go with the original research. You've got to find what the truth is. And caffeine decreases mental performance. And people say, well, I can't live without my caffeine. That's true, because the first time you took it, you got a boost. The second time you took it, you had to take it just to return to your baseline that you fell from when you took it the first time. And people who are chronic caffeine drinkers are never getting their brains boosted above what it was the first time they took caffeine. So, and caffeine disturbs your sleep. Disturbed sleep ends up increasing your risk of Alzheimer's. And it also, caffeine reduces the protective hormone melatonin. So be aware of that melatonin. Blue lights will also knock out your melatonin, like watching your TV late at night or working on your computer or your iPhone. Now, I mentioned earlier I would talk about alcohol because, yes, there's been a big push to claim that alcohol was the great brain preserver. It won't necessarily preserve a good brain. In fact, alcohol causes loss of important neurons and increases Alzheimer's changes in your brain. And these are not good. So you won't be looking at alcohol as a way of saving your brain. Because you need to remember, I mean, God says, forget it not. Here in Proverbs 31, 4 to 5, it says, it is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink, lest they drink and forget the law, and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. So you want to make sure that you will remember the law. Oh, wait. That's true on a personal level, but does modern Babylon drink wine? And do they forget the law? Sounds like Revelation 14, doesn't it? Yes, well, all right. Let's now move on to chemicals. You know, in our modern age, it's better living through chemistry. You go down to the supermarket, and you can buy all kinds of things. You go to your, you go to buy different foods, and you'll find that there's all kinds of pesticides and so forth. I mean, herbicides like Roundup, pesticides, especially like your pyrethrins, formaldehyde like in carpets and insulation boards and draperies and some clothes, arsenic like found in bottled water and chicken, aluminum like found in vaccinations and some cheese, mostly in cheese, fluoride like found in toothpaste, mercury like in injections and in fish, bromide like found in fire retardants and most new like bedding, medications like especially your antipsychotics and your antidepressants, anesthetics, and tobacco, all with chemicals that challenge your brain. Well, okay, but let's just, think about how we can reduce our risk, and let's start with the worst ones first. I mean, what food would be the worst for having the most chemicals, like pesticides and herbicides? And many people, when I say that, they jump right up and they say broccoli or strawberries, and that's an interesting perspective, because, I mean, how many strawberries would it take to feed a cow? I mean, there's a book out there, Beyond Beef, in which Jeremy Rifkin goes into some of this information. He says beef is the most dangerous food for herbicide contamination and ranks third in insecticide contamination. I mean, the cow ate more strawberries than you can eat. Well, they don't eat strawberries, but you get the idea. They eat a lot of food, and then you eat them. So animal products are the ones that are the most polluted with chemicals, not your strawberries. Oh, I'm saying if I get strawberries, I like to get organic, but that aside, you want to be sure and know that it's going to be the animal that eats tons of this stuff that's going to have more of it, because they concentrate it. Now, another thing that will impact your risk of Alzheimer's is mold exposure. It increases your risk of dementia. People don't realize where they get mold from, but you go to an old house, a water-damaged house, you get water damaged under your sinks in your bathroom and in your kitchen, you get water damage or just water sitting around in your bathroom and your shower, and mold grows, and it will cause Alzheimer's. It raises the inflammation in your body, it raises the inflammation in your brain, it gives you problems. But now, wait a minute, you think, I got a brand new house and everything's good, and I don't have any mold. A lot of people don't wait for mold to gather in their house. They go looking for it and buy it and eat it. How do they eat it? Well, I'm not just talking mushrooms. That would be a type of mold. But a lot of foods have mold. Any food created through rotting, fermenting, aging, spoiling. Vanilla was aged for 7 months. Coffee is aged. Chocolate is aged. Wine, vinegar. Some foods are just high in mold just because the way they're harvested. It's hard to get peanut butter without a little aflatoxin in it. But anyway, you can look up what fermented foods are and think about it. Cheese is especially bad. It's all these molds definitely attack your brain and decrease your ability to deal with things. Now, I found some fascinating studies that looked at sexual behavior in Alzheimer's. Reminds me of a very famous lecturer on, it was a doctor, and he wrote a book intended for pleasure, sexual techniques and sexual fulfillment in Christian marriage. There you go, Christian. And found out later on he was in the nursing home totally with Alzheimer's, but he was the proponent of you had to, crawl in bed with your wife every night and perform, and she should perform, and here this guy died of Alzheimer's. And very interesting that what happens when you're hypersexual or you're masturbating or whatever, it depletes the zinc, the essential element in your body, and your risk of Alzheimer's goes up. So beware of that. Now, sleep. If you sleep too short, like less than 7 hours, then your risk of Alzheimer's goes up 164%. You sleep too long, like more than 9 hours, your risk of Alzheimer's goes up by 123%. You take sleeping pills to try to fix the problem, and your risk of Alzheimer's goes up by 66%. So sleep hygiene, a good sleep, is very important. And what do? I got a sleeping pill. In studies looking at sleeping pills versus cognitive behavior therapy, in other words, dealing with stress through good thinking processes, the cognitive behavior therapy worked much better than any doctor-prescribed or nutraceutical sleep aid there was on the market. And so it's about stress. So if you're having trouble sleeping, it's not about a deficiency of Restoril or something else. So be sure you fix the problem at the root, not treat it with some kind of chemical on top of it. Now, there's another thing that most modern Americans are involved in that will increase their Alzheimer's, and that is entertainment, television, movies, YouTube, video games, computer time. Every hour per day spent in media entertainment increases your risk of Alzheimer's risk by 30%. So if you're watching 2 hours a day, 60%. 3 hours a day, 90%. You get the idea. The risk goes up. And so that's not very entertaining. Another thing that'll do it is electromagnetic fields. People take their cell phone and they put it up to their head. Within 20 minutes, the temperature of their brain rises by a half a degree. It disrupts neurons. It causes changes in your brain blood-brain barrier, and makes it so that things come into your brain that shouldn't be. Increases neurofibrillary tangles and so forth. So be aware of the electromagnetic fields. I mean, with 5G on the horizon, we're looking at some real challenges for our society, but I guess if you forget about it and it doesn't mean anything to you anymore, it won't matter to anybody anyway, except for the caretakers who have to take care of you because you got your Alzheimer's. Now, let's get on with physical activity and its impact. You know, people who are active physically have healthier brains. Being active physically supports a healthy body, which supports a healthy brain. Physical activity helps prevent Alzheimer's changes in your brain. The best times for exercise are before breakfast and immediately after each meal. And this after each meal is especially important for Alzheimer's, because if you don't exercise right after a meal, the blood stagnates to your stomach and drains your brain, and you end up with more risks of Alzheimer's. Going to bed on a full stomach is definitely a prescription for Alzheimer's. I hope that makes sense. All right. And the best exercise is walking. Why? Because you have more oxygen in your bloodstream for your activity level. Jogging will get you more blood flow around, but it'll have a lower oxygen level. And so walking improves brain function, increases memory, and reduces the risk of dementia. And people who get outdoors are definitely better off than those who live indoors. A healthy lifestyle with daily outdoor activity reduces your risk of dementia. Countries with lower average sunlight have higher Alzheimer's death rates. So I guess you could move to the equator to help Alzheimer's, but most people don't need to move to the equator. They need to move to their front porch or out in the front lawn. And outdoor air improves mental performance as opposed to indoor air where the oxygen has been used. When you sleep at night, you need your windows open. Otherwise, the carbon dioxide goes up in the room and your brain function deteriorates proportionally. Now, one good thing you can do that's very helpful is to garden. Combine physical and mental exercise in gardening is especially helpful. I mean, where is our ecological niche? Well, God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there He placed our first parents. And that was where they were to work and live. So if you're especially looking to get healthy, go back to your ecological niche. Where's a fish's ecological niche? In the water. Better keep him there. He does much better off. Now, water is especially helpful. Good hydration improves your memory and your intelligence and reduces your risk of dementia. Speaking of Alzheimer's, another disease that's somewhat analogous is Parkinson's. Parkinson's patients are chronically dehydrated and constipated even 20 years before the onset of their symptoms. And same is true for your brain in any disease. If you are dehydrated, as about 80% of Australians are and close to that many Americans are, you won't have good brain function. So you want to start the day off with, say, a quart or a liter of water. And during a day, studies by the U.S. military show that men, just for maintenance, need 3.7 liters or quarts of water a day, and women need 2.7 liters or quarts of water per day. And doesn't that sounds like quite a bit more than the 8 glasses that became popularized a few years ago. So keep ahead on water. And you can use the water not only for drinking, but hydrotherapy. And when we treat people with dementia or brain damage or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, we do hydrotherapy, hot and cold treatments on them. That's a whole nother topic, excuse me. Clearing my throat here. One of the things you can do is get up in the morning and take a cool morning sponge bath to stimulate your nerves. This helps your brain. Hot and cold showers invigorate your brains with good circulation. A hot and cold treatments to your brain can improve brain blood flow and oxygenation. John Harvey Kellogg talked about this and found it beneficial. Now, we talked about physical exercise. We need to talk about mental exercise or mental activity. Use it or lose it. Then the more you use it, like reading, discussing, studying, even doing word games and trivial games, this helps. People who don't use their brain much have a high risk of dementia. Those who use their brain with lots of mental activity, such as we mentioned there, can cut their risk of dementia down by 2/3. So keep a high level of mental activity. Learning new things, always learning new things. I've had older folks say, well, I'm going to learn to use a computer. I'm going to learn to sew. I'm going to learn. Yeah, and one lady, she was in her 70s, said, I'm going to learn to paint. She started painting. She became a famous painter, Grandma Moses of upstate New York. And so learning new things stimulates the brain to grow more neuronal networks which bypass damage areas in your brain. I mean, we say we only use 10% of our brains. Might as well use more of your brain and be sure that it is for things you want it to be used for. So really, you want to be in a program of lifelong learning. And one of the best things you can do for lifelong learning is Bible study. This is a mind builder. Nothing is more calculated to build your mind than good Bible study. Also, using memory exercises, using object lessons, blackboards, maps, figures, symbols, memory pegs called mnemonics, pictures, anything to help you remember can get you stimulated to a better memory. That's important. When I was putting the talk together, I remembered a couple years ago I had a patient that came to see me with Alzheimer's. Well, they didn't come to see me. Their family brought them to me. They didn't really realize they were having trouble, as most Alzheimer's patients don't, but the family talked to me. We put him on a good program like we're discussing here. Good, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, Bible study. Well, I had to know, well, did we do any good? I'm going to give a talk on this. Is our information helpful? So I called the family and said, how's brother so-and-so doing? And they said, well, he's doing great. No signs of dementia. As long as we keep him on his good program, he does well. And that's important to know. You can reverse it. You can make a difference, at least if it's early on. The patient has to be able to cooperate with the things we're talking about. But it's important to know that you're heading for something that's workable. It's doable. Now, stress is huge. Now we're going to talk about psychological factors. Stress is huge. Stress is about your emotions, your reaction to stimuli. Stress predicts the progression to dementia. If you're a stressy person, your brain just gives up and says, I can't handle this anymore. We're just going to start forgetting this. We're going to repress everything. And the memory goes. And so stress is about your emotions. So picking good emotions, cultivating good emotions, healthy emotions, well, like Galatians 5, right? 22, the fruits of the Spirit, 22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, that's a good emotion, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, all good emotions to cultivate. And people who are happier have brains that do well longer. It reminds me of Proverbs 17:22. A merry heart doth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. So a merry heart, keep happy, and your brain will be healthy. One of the ways to keep happy is to be around happy people. Have good friends. In fact, making friends is helpful. Having 5 to 6 close friends decreases your risk of cognitive decline by 250%. That's right, 250%. People with many friends see no cognitive decline over time. People with few friends see 250% more cognitive decline over time. So your friends are helping you. Spend some time with them. And in making friends, you can practice the one another Bible texts. You know, the Bible texts that say, one another, love one another. John 13:34 and 35. Accept one another, pray for one another, honor one another, encourage one another, carry one another's burdens, serve one another, which is a very big one, because people who do volunteer and help others have 1/4 the intellectual decline as those who don't volunteer or help others. You are made to live to give, to help others. More blessed to give than to receive. The Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and give his life a ransom for many. That's the pattern, and that helps your brain, helps reduce Alzheimer's. Well, back to our grandmother who came from Florida to come to Michigan to live with a family. They started feeding her on a good New Start diet, got involved in the family socially, got more care and interaction, and the family said she totally cleared up in her brain. All the reasons why she had to quit being independent down in Florida went away, and she was totally independent. She was benefited, and so reversed her dementia. Well, in summary, Alzheimer's. Healthy eating nurtures a healthy brain. Exercise, physical and mental, promotes a vigorous brain. Psychological and social health supports an active brain. So my recommendations: eat fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, but don't overeat. Limit or avoid animal products, fatty foods, fermented foods, processed foods, and chemicalized foods. Eat only at scheduled meal times and eat very little, if any, in the evening. Take time daily for vigorous exercise in the great outdoors, in the fresh air and sunshine, and in all and as natural an environment as you possibly can. Purposeful labor outdoors is especially good, like gardening. Drink plenty of fresh water. Avoid heavy metals, chemicals, pesticides, MSG, herbicides. Keep your mind active and challenged every day. Make friends and build social networks. Take steps to manage stress effectively. Take advantage of the help God can give you to live to the fullest, free from stress and worry. So there we are. If you go to my website, rev14.com, and click on Presentation Handouts, you'll see a handout down there. Click on that and download it, keeping your mind sharp. Okay.